Ellen, pull yourself together already. It's time to feast. Sit down at the table with Andrew Ryan and Ellen Chu on Feast Meets West.
欢迎光临，
欢迎光临，
欢迎光临。
先生，请问你们几位
2位。
Okay, hello, welcome to the feast, and this is Ellen Chu.
And this is Andrew Ryan, and we have with us our wintern.
Hello.
Our winning intern for the winter,
Right,
Keerthi
Keerthi.
Sridharan. Hi. So we actually have a great topic today that has a lot to do with Keerthi.
That sounded so ominous.
She's like, what are we doing?
Roasting you.
Right. He's
which-
preparing you, basing you now.
Roasting as in like roasting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
The
like
literal
that.
sense. This is a food show, Andrew.
Right.
So she got this idea recently to go out and interview some Indian food restaurants or Indian restaurateurs in Taiwan to find out what people think about Indian cuisine here and what these restaurateurs think about doing business in Taiwan. And so today, later on in our program, we're going to actually launch a 4-part series called Give It a Chai.
Wow.
CHAI.
CHAI, as in the
Milk
spiced
tea,
tea. Yeah, milk tea. Mm-hmm. So how did you get the idea to do this series in the first place?
Well, I mean, growing up the way that I did, moving all of the time, I never really spent too much time in India, where I'm from. And so my experience of Indian food has been what I've grown up eating in my mom's kitchen and what I've been able to find in the places where I've lived. And so there's a lot of debate about authenticity and, how traditions and spices and flavors change across cultures. And so when you're say, for example, cooking for the United States palate or the European palate, as opposed to, the classic Indian palate. And so when I moved to Taipei, I was honestly amazed by the concentration, the density of Indian restaurants here, because there are a lot of them.
And that's only recent, too. That's only in the last, I would say 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. But the sudden escalation, and it's growing, too.
And there is a not very small population of Indian people living here.
Yeah, it's growing. Yeah. So it's interesting. We actually cover a lot of topics that are related to Taiwanese and Chinese food and how it changes when it's brought overseas to other parts of the world, to America.
Yeah.
So now we're having the opportunity to look at how the other half lives.
Yeah.
How food
The
has
other
changed
side.
when it comes to Taiwan.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, because you mentioned Indian food and how it's changed in America or Europe. That is something you have more experience with. Can you talk a little bit about what the changes are made when Indian food is brought to those countries?
I mean, in my experience, I lived in DC for 3 years, and there it was mostly if you go into an Indian restaurant and you order something and it's supposed to be spicy, you have to let the person know that you want it to be spicy. And that's something I found with, I was born in Beijing, so that's something I found with Chinese food as well. When I'm overseas, I have to be like, no, you don't understand. I want gong bao, and I want it the way it's meant to be.
So you want Chinese spicy, not American spicy,
right? Yeah,
or
and so
Indian
that's
spicy.
That's the levels. And also there's some of the subtleties in flavor are sometimes lost. Because my only real comparison is how my mom makes it versus how restaurants make it. And I mean, there's always going to be a difference between homemade food. It's always going to be better than restaurant food. But I mean, I'm a little biased. But
But with the spices, I find that when I go to India, the spices are very strong.
Yeah.
Even on the streets, you can smell the spices from the restaurants.
Right,
So
yeah.
in the restaurants here or, wherever you lived around the world, do you think that they really cut down the spices because, they're afraid that the local people cannot, take the strong spices?
I think it's less about a general cutting down on spices and more trying to give people what they expect Indian cuisine is supposed to taste like, which can be a little disappointing because as someone who, at least I hope, knows what it's supposed to taste like, it's well, okay, this is just what everyone thinks Indian food is. This isn't actual Indian food. In the same way that, you see a lot of caricatures of minority cultures in media and things like that, Apu from The Simpsons or something like that, right? You see the image of what people think Indian is instead of the real thing. But in Taipei, I've found more and more through, partly through Give It a Try and through just my experiences of living here, there's a lot more commitment to real authenticity.
Actually, it's interesting you brought up Apu because he was, I guess he was working in a convenience store.
Supermarket, yeah.
And he was voiced by a white man.
Voiced by a white guy.
Important to point out. But now, so I'm curious to know, with the restaurants that you went and visited in Taiwan, were they all run by Indians or were they run by Taiwanese people making Indian food?
They were all run by Indians.
Okay.
Yeah.
A place where they have the ability to create something
Right,
that is
yeah,
authentic.
they still have that genuine connection with what the food is originally and what most of them, at least to an extent, grew up in India, right? So they have that connection with what the food is supposed to taste like, how you're supposed to cook it, all that stuff.
But also the desire to, to sell their food.
Right, yeah.
Right. It's just like when I'm in the States, you go to a lot of Chinese restaurants, they're run by Chinese people, but, they don't taste Chinese.
Well, I have to say too, though, is like a lot of times if you go to a Chinese restaurant in, like, for example, New York City,
right,
a lot of the staff will be Mexican or they will be, from somewhere else. They're not necessarily Chinese people making the food either.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Is that true in Taiwan as well?
I mean, there are some, like, it's just because the restaurant owner is Indian doesn't mean that the staff are all Indian or something like that. There's a lot of, especially wait staff tend to be Taiwanese. Yeah.
And not to say that somebody who's Taiwanese cannot make authentic Indian food or
Not at all.
or that a Mexican can't make authentic Chinese food.
Right.
A lot of that actually lies on the owner, him or herself. Yeah. So what were you hoping to find in your series?
I honestly went in as open-minded as I could. I think I was just looking for an answer as to why the Indian food in Taiwan, and in Taipei specifically, is probably the closest thing I've had to home food since I've come here. And I think it's the closest place I've lived in that's like to home, technically, assuming that home is India. But I have to feel like there's more to that, like more than just geographic proximity, right? And so my assumption going in was, and no spoilers, but my assumption going in was that I think the Taiwanese population has a lot to do with it. And I think the Taiwanese population's kind of commitment to wanting the real thing, not wanting a caricature or just what they think it's going to be like, but wanting to actually genuinely explore all these new cultures.
Well, in terms of heat levels in the food, like I think a Taiwanese audience would be much better prepared to deal with spicy food.
A lot higher of a tolerance. Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see what you have found. And for the next 4 weeks, we are going to be airing 4 episodes of Give It a Try, a short segment in Feast Meets West, so we can hear about you and your journey.
Wow.
It's very exciting.
I'm excited, yeah.
Yeah. Shall we check out what's on our menu today?
Definitely.
All right, let's do it.
In our first course, we begin by a look of the origins of the word tea, cha, chai, and the fascinating way in which they are connected.
In our second course, Keerthi helps us launch her series, Give It a Try, by serving up a cup of homemade chai, which was actually made by your mom, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, before we do anything, we're going to go straight into a song, and this has something to do with tea.
Yes. Well, tea in our culture probably brings you a lot of memory because generations after generations, we drink tea.
That is right.
So Jay Cho brings you this song called 爷爷泡的茶, so the tea that grandpa made.
And we'll be back in a moment with the origins of the words tea, cha, and chai when the feast continues.
First course.
Okay.
Origins of the word tea, cha, chai.
So, as you can tell, tea doesn't sound like cha or chai. Cha is Chinese. Tea is English. Chai is that? Am I saying it correctly?
Chai is Hindi. And I mean, most Indian languages say chai.
So we found this interesting article on quartz. It's in the headline of the article is tea if by sea, cha if by land, why the world only has 2 words for tea. That's actually not true. There are more words. There are certain places in Africa that have words for tea that are not connected to
chai
either of
or
those.
tea.
And I'm guessing there are probably also Native American words that are unrelated. But actually, what's interesting here in Taiwan, we have a version of tea that sounds like tea, and we have a version that sounds like chai.
Right.
So, because in Taiwanese, the way you say it is day,
Day.
lim day, to drink
Lim
tea.
day.
Lim day.
Yeah. Lim day.
Say the 2 non-Taiwanese speakers.
Right.
So we actually ended up with both variations of that word. But basically what the article is positing is if it went from China across land, then it's more likely that it would be cha or chai. And if it went over water or from a coastal area of China, it would be more like day because it would be from the Minnan dialect. And actually because the Dutch came to Taiwan, so they brought tea day from the coastal areas of Taiwan and southern China through, through Indonesia, around to the Netherlands. And they also brought it across to the southern tip of India, it looks like. We have a nice little map here, which you can see if you look for this article based on tea if by sea, cha if by land.
That's like
Yeah,
Sri
Sinhala,
Lanka.
that's Sri Lanka,
right,
yeah.
Right.
Oh, right. I knew that.
Yeah.
Andrew does geography.
I am wearing my eyeglasses too. But across most of Europe, it's like tea in German and thé in français, en français.
Français, du thé.
Du thé. And then Arabic, Turkish, Russian, Persian, all come from more like from the cha roots.
You know why? Because
Korean.
it's all along the Silk Road and close to China region.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So they would have brought tea across the Silk Road, of course,
Right.
right? But I think it's fascinating to look at the map and see all the places where they say, the variation that's closer to cha and the variation that's closer to tea. What's interesting, though, is the Portuguese. That's one of the few places in Europe where their version of the word for tea is actually closer to cha. Macau, that's where they got it from.
Right.
And I guess it sounds like cha.
Because I was gonna say because of Macau, right? So
they would have brought it from the more like the mainland Chinese version of
Right.
the word
Cha.
across the ocean. So that's one of the few places that got it via the sea that doesn't have the T pronunciation.
interesting.
Fascinating. Taiwan and India, because that's obviously the 2 cultures we're talking about today, do both have very rich tea cultures and
Right.
traditions.
Yeah.
So that's one of the areas in which the cuisines and the cultures would overlap.
Yeah.
Do you see any other overlaps, or is that the only obvious overlap?
Well, I mean, spoilers, but
I mean, without giving anything away.
right, there's something
Religion.
I mean, yeah, there's that too. There's strong Buddhist
Religion,
culture
right.
Across Taiwan and India. But in terms of just food, we steam things a lot.
Oh, really?
Which is really nice. Yeah. You find it less common in North India, but in South India we have idlis, which are like steamed rice cakes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's really interesting because I've seen my mom making idli and things, and then I've been to Din Tai Fung and seen them making the xiaolongbao and things like that, and it's really interesting to see the similarities in this.
Do you see any relationship between dumpling or wrapped food items like samosas and
Right. Yeah. I mean,
like-
there's definitely like wrapped parcels are a very East Asian, Southeast Asian, like South Asian, like that across all those cultures. You have your trademark wrapped parcel for every region, I think. Yeah, you definitely have samosas in northern India, and then you have like dumplings and that sort of thing.
And obviously there would be a large Chinese population in the big cities of India as well.
Yeah, and vice versa. I mean, there's a huge Indian population here in Taipei, and a really large one in China as well.
Fascinating. And the tea is also not just a part of cuisine, it's also a part of interacting with people. Sitting down over a cup of tea.
Yeah, it's a social ritual as much as food is, I think. I think the two cultures are really good at prioritizing things like food and drink and connecting over things like food.
And I wonder, like in India, do they have like rituals like in Chinese? You know, they have those
Like tea ceremony?
Yeah, tea ceremonies.
Cha dao,
Like
yeah.
in Japan and China.
Yeah,
Taiwan?
that
Do they?
sort of thing. Not to my knowledge, but I'm not the expert in tea related things. I'm more of a peppermint gal myself. But
A peppermint, really?
yeah,
What do you
I'm
mean?
a trader. I I do the microwave a mug of water and put a peppermint tea bag in it, and that's my tea ritual, guys. That's my mother's about to disown me right now.
Well, we'll win her back because we're going to be
Right.
serving up her chai in just a moment in our second course. Before we do that, we're going to play another song.
Tea for two, of course.
Okay, and this is Sarah Vaughan's version of that song, but actually it's a remix. And who's the remix by?
Shaw remix.
All right. Much more to come when the feast continues.
Nobody near us to see us or hear us. No friends or relations.
Second course. Okay, we are back now for a cup of chai with Keerthi. Yay!
So,
right.
mommy made it, right?
Mommy made chai, yeah, and you guys need to tell me how many spoons of sugar we're putting into your chai.
Okay.
What is the normal amount?
Oof. Okay, so you're gonna have to redefine normal because for me, I'd say like 2 is pushing it. My mom has 3 as a minimum.
Oh.
And there's actually a running joke in my family that my mom likes some tea with her sugar.
Oh.
So
Right.
if that's what, I'm guessing that's what you want.
Yes.
Ellen. Yeah.
I
yeah.
would like some tea with my sugar.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
I'll go with 1.
1?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think 1 is probably a good
It's a
idea.
good place to start. I mean, you can always add more.
We can
That's
reel
not
it in
enough.
from there.
Yeah.
So she's just actually putting the sugar in the cup first, and this
Yeah.
this is how you do it, right?
Well, I mean, actually, the way that, the way that you do it is that you add sugar based on, you know, who's drinking it.
Okay.
Okay.
And you put it in before you put the tea in.
And
Okay.
it makes us bitter.
Ooh, Ellen Chu going for 3.
Wow.
3 or 2.5?
3.
Okay.
Oh my
Alright, This
God.
is like a tea gradient because I went for 2.
1 for me, 2 for Keerthi, 3 for Ellen Chu.
There we go. All right, I'm gonna get up and pour this.
And she's got a flask of tea there. This is, of course, as we mentioned, this is chai. Very
You
nice.
hear the flask. And there's mine.
So what's in this tea, Keerthi?
So we have.
It's tea.
One would assume. So chai means tea. So we have tea leaves dried up, and you know the way that they are in grains, the way that you get it as as loose leaf tea.
Okay.
So we have that.
Is it a black
and
tea?
It's black tea. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's steeped in water, and then milk is poured in, but it's cooked together. It's boiled down together, so that it's a more cohesive mixture than the way that the British make their tea is a lot more, you know, like spot of milk inside.
Spot of milk.
Yeah. There you go.
Spot of milk.
I don't know what accent that was,
No, I
but
don't either, but there it was.
and we have fresh ginger
Okay.
and dried cardamom.
Ooh.
And then when everything is done steeping, when it's nice and hot and been simmering for a while, she strains it. So all the actual loose leaf tea and the cardamom and the ginger don't make it into the final product.
Oh, excellent.
That's what you have there.
And this is something that you would have had ever since you were a kid?
Yeah. And no one in my family can make it the way that my mom can. So, yeah.
It's good.
It is
Yeah.
really good. It's
I like
very
the
nice.
ginger in there.
I'm glad I went for 1 teaspoon. Perfect.
I'm glad I had it 3.
And 2 is good for me. So that's where we're at.
It feels like the 3 little bears or whatever. Goldilocks and
The
the
3 little
Papa
bears.
Bear. Yeah.
or whatever.
No, I'm just thinking about Goldilocks like blowing 3 houses down because you're definitely getting
Yeah.
your stories mixed up.
Oh, yeah.
Bust it.
Busted. I guess I'm a little
Don't
farther away
test
from
the
my
English
childhood.
major.
Right.
So what should we call your mom? What would I call her? Auntie or
Mrs.
No, she's probably not that much older than
I know. So Mrs.
Mrs.
I don't know. I don't know
Sridharan.
what she would want to be called. I think you guys can probably just call her Banu. That's her nickname.
Banu.
Banu.
Well, thank you so much if you're listening to this show. It is
Right.
wonderful. I would love to come over and ring your doorbell.
She'd be happy to have
When
you.
we're feeling down and low,
Yes.
or when we're stressed out, we're gonna go ring Banu's doorbell.
That's
Hopefully, you have a
right.
pot of tea ready for us.
Or, anything else you want to make. Because I think I'd probably be pretty good with everything.
Yep.
I'm pretty good too, and I have the same taste as you with sugar.
Yeah.
And when does she usually make this? Would she make it in the morning? Or?
It depends. She usually has like a cup a day, and then there's usually enough for like at least me and my grandmother to have a cup. But it depends on like when we have dinners at home, when we have people over for dinner or for lunch. It's always like maybe like 20 or 30 minutes after dessert. You go around and you're like, who wants tea? And if anyone says no, we make them a cup anyway, and they end up drinking it. Because once you see a room full of people just like going into conniptions about how amazing it is, then they usually want to taste.
You
So.
start looking around for the to-go cups, or
Yeah.
you bring your own flask.
Exactly.
I know why Andrew is asking this question, so he know when to ring the doorbell.
That's right.
That was a question of survey.
You always
Usually
need to
you'd
know.
have butter biscuits or just like tea biscuits.
Butter
I make
biscuit.
a really good tea cake that goes with this.
And
so
you didn't do that today?
No
what
pressure.
can I say?
Yeah.
Let me just pull out a giant pound cake, guys. I was hiding this from you the whole time.
We were hoping for that.
Well, thank you once again to Banu and also to Keerthi for that. We have another song. It's called Liao Tian. Chatting.
Chatting.
Fits in with the topic, right?
Right.
Chatting over chai. And this is by Guo Jing Claire.
Okay, to chai.
Yeah.
To chai.
Ooh.
There we go.
You're listening to Feast Meets West.
From a fruit market in Tel Aviv to a fish seller in Taipei, the people of our world are working hard to make a living. Are you listening? Tune in to the sounds of your world on Radio Taiwan International.
Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to our Feast Meets West.
Hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all have some sort of chai in your hand so you can set yourself in the mood.
Yes, I've enjoyed listening with my chai in hand.
That's right.
What am I going to do next week? I'm going to have to go to your
bring
mom's
more.
place.
Ring the doorbell.
Well, send us a letter. We would love to hear from you. P.O. Box 123-199, Taipei, Taiwan.
Email us at androo@rti.org.tw.
And we have one final topical song this week. Do you want to introduce that, Ellen Cho?
Yes, it's called 印度小夜曲, Indian Serenade, Wang Dawen. Wow, it's sung by a Chinese person?
I think he's actually maybe overseas Chinese. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure the connection,
We will see.
but
Check it out.
it's all about connections.
Connection.
Connections.
Okay.
Yes, that's what our whole show is
You
about.
guys could see these hand gestures.
We both did some fancy hand gestures. Go fancy or go
It's
home.
the connection.
All
okay?
right. For Feast Meets West, I'm Andrew Ryan.
And this is Ellen.
I'm Keerthi Sridharan.
And
Bye.
thank you. Actually, this is your last episode with us on Feast for
Sorry,
now.
I'll miss
Okay.
you. I'll come
For
back.
now. Please come back.
Be
We'd love to
back.
have you back.
Do you guys want me back? Email them and tell them that you want me
Yes,
back. I'll come
okay.
back.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, there we go.
If we pass 10, she's not going back.
I'm staying
She's
right
moving
here.
in.
She's moving here.
6A.
All right.
All right. See you later.
我曾梦见